What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved environmental champions walks into what he thinks is a friendly interview, only to face the most brutal character assassination ever broadcast on daytime television? The answer will leave you speechless. What you're about to witness isn't just another celebrity spat. It's the moment Leonardo DiCaprio's legendary composure shattered into a million pieces on live television, creating what insiders are calling the most explosive confrontation in talk show history. The Oscar winner arrived at the View studio expecting a pleasant conversation about his latest environmental documentary. What he got instead was a calculated ambush that would escalate from polite disagreement to full-scale warfare in less than 20 minutes. By the time DiCaprio stormed off set, his face purple with rage and his voice from shouting, everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. This wasn't a debate. This was a demolition. And Joy Behar, she orchestrated every devastating second. The stage was set like any other Tuesday morning at The View. Studio lights blazed with their usual intensity, casting that familiar warm glow across the iconic semicircular table. The audience filed in, excited for another episode of their favorite daytime talk show, completely unaware they were about to witness television history. Leonardo DiCaprio, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit with an open collar white shirt, made his entrance to enthusiastic applause. He smiled that famous smile, waving to the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who had done thousands of interviews. Why wouldn't he be relaxed? He was there to talk about something he loved. His new environmental documentary that had been making waves in the film festival circuit. The project had consumed 3 years of his life, taking him to melting glaciers in Greenland, devastated rainforests in Brazil, and drought-stricken communities across Africa. He had partnered with leading climate scientists to create what critics were calling the most comprehensive look at environmental challenges ever put to film. As DiCaprio settled into the plush guest chair, exchanging pleasantries with the panel, everything seemed perfectly normal. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him warmly, praising his latest acting work and his long-standing commitment to environmental causes. Sarah Haynes asked about his experience filming in extreme locations. Alyssa Farah-Griffin inquired about the documentary's most powerful moments. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and genuine interest from both the hosts and the audience. But those who knew Joy Behar really knew her recognized something in her demeanor. She was unusually quiet during those opening minutes, sitting back in her chair with a thin smile playing on her lips. Her notes lay spread before her like ammunition waiting to be deployed. She barely touched her coffee. Her eyes tracked DiCaprio's every movement with the focused intensity of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Little did Leonardo DiCaprio know, but Joy had spent the previous evening preparing for this interview with unusual throws. She had compiled a list of what she considered DiCaprio's environmental hypocrisies, researched his investment portfolio, and crafted questions designed not to illuminate but to inflame. The morning's pleasant opening wasn't an interview strategy. It was a trap being carefully set. And DiCaprio, trusting and earnest in his passion for environmental advocacy, walked right into it. The temperature in the studio changed in an instant. Joy leaned forward, that signature smirk spreading across her face like a crack in ice. The shift was so abrupt that the camera operators later said they felt it through their viewfinders. "So, Leo," Joy began, drawing out his name with unmistakable disdain, each syllable dripping with condescension. "You're here talking about climate change again." She paused, letting the word again hang in the air like an accusation. "Tell me, how many private jets did you take to get here today?" The studio audience's cheerful murmur died instantly. DiCaprio's eyebrows furrowed slightly, surprise flickering across his famous features. He had expected substantive questions about the document's findings, about the scientists he worked with, about the solutions being proposed. This was something else entirely. "Actually, Joy," he responded, maintaining his composure, though his jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. "I drove here from my hotel. I've been very conscious about reducing my carbon footprint, which is exactly why I'm here today to discuss." "Oh, please," Joy interrupted with a dismissive wave of her hand, the kind of gesture that erases another person's words from existence. You lecture the rest of us about our carbon emissions while you yacht around the Mediterranean with supermodels. Don't you think that's just a tiny bit hypocritical? The word hypocritical landed like a slap. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Whoopi Goldberg's eyes darted between her co-host and their guest, clearly sensing that this wasn't going to be the usual friendly exchange. Sarah Haynes bit her lip. Alyssa Farrah Griffin's smile froze on her face. The audience fell into that particular kind of silence that comes when people sense conflict brewing but don't yet know how bad it's going to get. DiCaprio straightened in his chair, his posture shifting from relaxed to defensive. His voice remained calm, but there was a new edge to it. The first hairline fracture in his diplomatic facade. Joy, I think you're conflating personal choices with systemic advocacy. Yes, I've made mistakes in the past, but I've also donated over $100 million to environmental causes. I've changed my entire lifestyle. A H100 red million? Joy scoffed loudly, the sound harsh and mocking. That's pocket change for someone worth $300 million. What percentage of your wealth is that really? She didn't wait for an answer. And don't get me started on that foundation of yours. How much of that money actually goes to the environment versus administrative costs? DiCaprio's hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrests, now gripped them slightly. His knuckles began to pale. I'm sorry. Are you questioning the legitimacy of my foundation? His voice dropped lower, a dangerous register that anyone who knew him would have recognized as a warning sign. The first storm clouds gathering on a previously clear horizon. Because if you are, he continued, each word carefully controlled, I can provide you with detailed financial reports that show exactly where every dollar goes. Joy leaned back in her chair with visible satisfaction, like a chess player who had just executed the opening moves of a winning strategy. She was clearly enjoying this, feeding off his discomfort. Oh, I'm sure you can provide reports. Hollywood accounting is famous for making numbers say whatever you want them to say, just like how you made yourself look like an environmentalist while burning fossil fuels faster than most small countries. The studio audience gasped. Some literally recoiled in their seats. This wasn't playful banter or spirited debate. This was character assassination in progress. Sarah Haynes tried to jump in with a question about the documentary itself, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer waters. But Joy wasn't done. Not even close. You know what really bothers me about celebrities like you? Joy continued, pointing her pen at DiCaprio like a weapon, like an accusatory finger made of ink and plastic. You think because you played someone important in a movie that somehow makes you an expert on everything? You dropped out of high school, Leo. What exactly qualifies you to lecture world leaders about climate policy? The air in the studio crackled with tension? You could cut it with a knife. DiCaprio's jaw tightened visibly, his teeth grinding together behind his professionally whitened smile that had now completely vanished. His face flushed slightly, the first visible sign that his legendary composure was beginning to crack under sustained assault. Education comes in many forms, Joy. His voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the silk. Now, I've spent the last 15 years working with scientists, researchers, and policy experts. I visited melting glaciers, deforested areas, and communities affected by climate change. Have you? It was a measured counterattack, professional and controlled. But Joy was ready for it, even eager for it. She had been waiting for him to push back, so she could escalate further. I don't need to visit glaciers to know when someone's being a hypocrite. Joy shot back immediately, her voice rising in volume and intensity. And I certainly don't need to be lectured by someone who thinks private jet travel is justified as long as you buy carbon offsets afterward. That's like saying it's okay to punch someone as long as you apologize later. That's a completely false equivalency. DiCaprio responded, his voice rising slightly for the first time. The careful diplomatic mask was starting to slip. Carbon offsets, when done properly, do make a measurable difference. The projects I support have removed thousands of tons of carbon from the atmosphere. Joy rolled her eyes so dramatically that people in the back row of the audience could see it. The gesture was designed to humiliate, to diminish, to mock. Oh, please. Carbon offsets are just a way for rich people to buy their way out of guilt. It's like medieval indulgences: pay money and all your sins are forgiven. Meanwhile, regular people have to choose between heating their homes and buying groceries because of energy policies that people like you champion. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. The implications were clear and damning. DiCaprio wasn't an environmental advocate. He was an elitist hypocrite whose policies hurt ordinary Americans while his wealth insulated him from the consequences. DiCaprio leaned forward, his blue eyes flashing with the first genuine anger. People like me. His voice had developed a dangerous edge. What exactly do you mean by that, Joy? I mean wealthy Hollywood elites who are completely disconnected from how real people live. She replied without hesitation, without mercy. You live in a bubble of yes men and private islands. When gas prices go up because of environmental regulations, you don't feel it. When energy costs skyrocket, it doesn't affect your lifestyle one bit. The battle lines were drawn now, clear and unmistakable. Joy had positioned herself as a champion of ordinary Americans, fighting against outhouse celebrity elitism. DiCaprio was being cast as the villain in his own story. The rich hypocrite presuming to tell hard-working people how to live. You're absolutely wrong. DiCaprio's voice now carried real heat, genuine anger bleeding through his professional composure. I grew up in Los Angeles. My mother was a single parent. I know what it's like to worry about bills, and that's exactly why I care about creating sustainable solutions that benefit everyone, not just the wealthy. Joy laughed. It wasn't a chuckle or a giggle. It was a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the studio like breaking glass. Oh, spare me the sober story. You haven't worried about a bill in 30 years. Don't sit there and pretend you understand the struggles of working families when you spend more on a single vacation than most people make in a lifetime. That was the moment. Everyone in the studio would later agree that was a precise moment when Leonardo DiCaprio's facade finally began to crack. His face flushed a deeper red, starting at his collar and spreading upward. He shook his head in disbelief, his carefully styled hair falling slightly across his forehead. This is exactly the problem with political discourse today. His voice trembled slightly with barely contained fury. Instead of discussing actual solutions, you're more interested in personal attacks and character assassination. Character assassination. Joy's voice pitched higher with theatrical surprise, her hand spreading wide in a gesture of mock innocence. I'm just asking questions that your facing fans and the media are too struck to ask. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your lifestyle choices, maybe you shouldn't be positioning yourself as a moral authority on environmental issues. Basic scrutiny, DiCaprio repeated, his voice incredulous, his eyes wide with disbelief. You've done nothing but attack me personally from the moment I sat down. You haven't asked a single question about the documentary, the science, or the solutions we're proposing. Joy shrugged with feigned innocence, her expression suggesting she couldn't imagine what he was talking about. I'm asking about your credibility. If you're going to be the face of environmentalism, don't people deserve to know whether you actually practice what you preach? The studio held its collective breath. The other hosts sat frozen, uncertain whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue to unfold. Whoopi's hand hovered near her words, but she couldn't seem to form words. The audience members looked at each other with wide eyes, sensing they were witnessing something historic, but not yet knowing how historic it would become. And then Leonardo DiCaprio stood up. The movement was so abrupt, so unexpected that it caused the other hosts to physically flinch. Joy's satisfied smile flickered for just a moment, surprise crossing her features before she regained control. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their frames, trying to capture this unprecedented moment. Security guards near the studio wall straightened up. Suddenly alert, DiCaprio stood there towering over the seated panel, his chest heaving slightly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice had transformed from diplomatic to dangerous, from measured to molten. You know what, Joy? Each word was carefully enunciated, dripping with controlled rage. I came here in good faith to discuss serious environmental issues that affect every person on this planet. Issues that will determine whether our children and grandchildren inherit a habitable world. And all you've done is launch personal attacks. Joy remained seated, her satisfied smile returning, growing wider. She was getting exactly what she wanted. DiCaprio losing control on national television. Oh, so now you're going to storm off? Very mature, Leo. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle being challenged. Challenged? DiCaprio's voice boomed through the studio, louder than anyone had ever heard him speak. Loud enough to make the sound engineers wheeze. You call this a challenge? You haven't presented a single fact, a single counterargument, or a single alternative solution. All you've done is try to tear me down personally because you disagree with environmental policy. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter. The air felt thinner. Every person in that space knew they were watching something they would talk about for years. Sit down, Leonardo, Joy commanded, her voice dripping with condescension. Every syllable designed belittle and diminish. You're embarrassing yourself on national television. I'm embarrassing myself. DiCaprio laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of any actual humor. He remained standing, his posture aggressive, his entire body language transformed from Hollywood charm to raw confrontation. You're the one whose turn what should have been a serious discussion about our planet's future into a tabloid hit piece. Whoopi finally found her voice, desperately trying to restore some semblance of order to the chaos unfolding before millions of viewers. Leo, please, let's just know. Oh, Whoopi. DiCaprio interrupted, his eyes never leaving Joy, locked on her like a guided missile. I want to hear more of Joy's brilliant insights. Please, Joy, enlighten us all. What's your solution to climate change? What's your plan for the millions of people who will be displaced by rising sea levels? What's your answer for the communities already devastated by extreme weather? Joy leaned back in her chair, clearly relishing every moment of DiCaprio's breakdown. Her smile had transformed into something triumphant, almost predatory. My solution? Stop listening to hypocritical celebrities and start listening to scientists who don't have massive financial conflict of interest. Financial conflicts of interest. DiCaprio S voice rose another octave, cracking slightly with a strain of shouting, What financial conflicts are you talking about? I've invested my own money into renewable energy, sustainable technology, and conservation efforts. If anything, I lose money by advocating for environmental causes. Oh, please. Joy waved her hand dismissively, the gesture now familiar and infuriating in equal measure. Your Tesla investments alone have made you millions as governments push electric vehicle mandates. Your solar company stocks have tripled as subsidies pour in. Don't pretend this isn't profitable for you. DiCaprio S face went from red to purple. His hands were shaking now, trembling with barely suppressed fury. Are you seriously suggesting that I'm advocating for environmental causes to make money? That's not just wrong, it's insane. It's delusional. What's insane, Joy shot back without missing a beat, is thinking we should restructure our entire economy based on the opinions of someone whose biggest qualification is pretending to be other people for a living. The audience sat in complete silence now. No gasps, no murmurs, just shocked stillness. Sarah Haynes and Alyssa Farrah Griffin looked like deer caught in headlights, their professional smiles long abandoned, replaced by expressions of pure horror at what was unfolding. They wanted to intervene, but had no idea how. This had gone so far beyond normal television conflict that there was no playbook to follow. DiCaprio began pacing behind his chair, his movements jerky and agitated like a caged animal looking for escape. My biggest qualification? My biggest qualification? His voice cracked with incredible. I've worked with NASA scientists, NOAA researchers, and climatologists from every major university in the world. I've funded peer-reviewed studies and conservation projects on 6 continents. And I'm sure they all told you exactly what you wanted to hear. Joy replied smoothly, her voice calm and controlled in stark contrast to DiCaprio's escalating fury. Funny how the science always seems to align perfectly with your political agenda, isn't it? Political agenda? DiCaprio stopped pacing and stared at her, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Saving the planet is a political agenda. Protecting future generations is a political agenda when it involves massive government control over energy, transportation, and industry. Yes, it absolutely is a political agenda, Joy responded firmly, her voice gaining strength and conviction. And when celebrities like you push these policies while living lifestyles that mock the very principles you claim to support, it becomes propaganda. The word propaganda detonated in the studio like a bomb. DiCaprio slammed his hand down on the back of his chair, the loud bang echoing off the walls, causing several audience members to jump in their seats. The sound was violent, shocking, completely at odds with DiCaprio's carefully cultivated image as Hollywood's thoughtful, soft-spoken environmental conscience. That's enough. His voice was raw now, stripped of all polish and diplomacy. You don't know what you're talking about. You sit here in your television studio making jokes and attacking people who are actually trying to solve problems. Joy's voice became even more mocking, rising to match his intensity. Your idea of solving problems is flying to climate conferences and private jets to give speeches about how everyone else needs to sacrifice. I have not taken a private jet to a climate conference in over 3 years, DiCaprio shouted, his voice reaching levels that made the audio engineers scramble to adjust their levels. But you wouldn't know that because you don't actually research anything you say. You just repeat talking points designed to attack anyone who threatens your worldview. Joy stood up now, too, rising to meet him, matching his energy, refusing to be intimidated. The battle had become fully joined. My worldview is that we shouldn't destroy our economy and way of life based on predictions from the same people who told us we'd be in an ice age 40 years ago. That's a complete lie. DiCaprio's voice cracked with frustration, his composure now just a distant memory. The scientific consensus on climate change has been consistent for decades. You're spreading disinformation. You're lying to people. Disinformation? Joy laughed harshly, the sound brittle and sharp. I'm spreading disinformation. You're the one who made a documentary claiming Miami would be underwater by now. You're the one who said Arctic ice would be gone by 2020. Where's the ice, Leo? Where is it? The Arctic has lost 75% of its ice mass. DiCaprio roared, his voice echoing to the studio like thunder. The data is clear. The evidence is overwhelming. And you're sitting here denying reality like some kind of conspiracy theorist. I'm sitting here asking why we should trust someone who's been wrong about every prediction he's made. Joy fired back, her voice now matching his in volume and intensity. You've been preaching climate doom for 20 years. And yet here we are, still above water, still growing food, still living our lives. DiCaprio pointed an accusatory finger at her, his arms shaking with rage. People are dying, Joy. Right now, people are dying. Extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and intensity. Droughts are destroying communities. Hurricanes are getting stronger. But you don't care because it doesn't affect your comfortable life in New York. People have always died from natural disasters. Joy replied coldly, her voice like ice. That doesn't mean we should panic and hand over control of our lives to environmental extremists who want to tell us what cars to drive, what food to eat, and how to heat our homes. Environmental extremists. DiCaprio's voice was now hoarse from shouting rough and ragged. Wanting clean air and water makes me an extremist. Wanting a habitable planet for future generations makes me an extremist. Wanting to control every aspect of human behavior under the guise of environmental protection makes you an extremist. Yes, Joy answered without hesitation. Without doubt, her conviction absolute. The tension in the studio was now suffocating, physically oppressive. Security guards had moved closer to the set, positioning themselves strategically, ready to intervene if the verbal warfare turned physical. The other hosts looked completely overwhelmed, their faces pale, their bodies rigid with tension. Producers off camera were frantically signaling to each other, debating whether to cut to commercial, whether to shut this down, but also knowing they were capturing television gold. DiCaprio ran both hands through his hair, pulling at it, his careful styling completely destroyed. He looked like a man at the absolute end of his rope, his famous charm and composure obliterated. This is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. You're more interested in scoring political points than discussing solutions to the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. And you're more interested in virtue signaling than admitting your entire movement is built on fear-mongering and hypocrisy. Joy retorted, her voice sharp as a blade. Fear-mongering? DiCaprio, unk. S voice dropped suddenly to a dangerous whisper. The kind of quiet that's more terrifying than screaming. Joy, do you have children? The question hung in the air like a threat. Joy's confident expression flickered for the first time. Yes, I do. And I don't appreciate you bringing them into this, she responded defensively, her voice losing some of its aggressive edge. I'm not bringing them into anything, DiCaprio said, his voice growing louder again, building like a wave. The climate crisis is bringing them into it. Every day we delay action is another day we're stealing from their future. Every day we waste in denial is a day we can never get back. Joy rolled her eyes dramatically, regaining her composure. Oh, spare me the emotional manipulation. My children will be fine because they'll live in a world with abundant energy, modern technology, and economic prosperity, not the pre-industrial wasteland you're trying to create. DiCaprio's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and pure rage. Pre-industrial wasteland? Are you completely out of your mind? Renewable energy is the most advanced technology humanity has ever developed. Wind turbines, solar panels, battery storage. These are cutting-edge innovations. Advanced technology that doesn't work when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, Joy sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But I'm sure your mansions have backup generators for when the grid fails. This conversation is over, DiCaprio declared abruptly, his voice flat and final. He moved toward the edge of the set, his movement sharp and decisive. I refuse to waste another second trying to have a rational discussion with someone who's clearly more interested in character assassination than actual facts. Running away again, Leo, Joy called after him mockingly, her voice carrying across the studio. This is perfect. The great environmental crusader can't handle a few tough questions from a talk show host. DiCaprio spun around so fast that the camera operator struggled to follow him, their frames momentarily catching only blur. His face was a mask of fury, veins visible in his temples. His jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Tough questions. Tough questions. He was screaming now, all pretense of control abandoned. You haven't asked me a single legitimate question this entire time. All you've done is spew conspiracy theories and personal attacks. You haven't engaged with the science, the data, or the solutions. You've just attacked me as a person. Conspiracy theories. Joy's voice reached a shrieking pitch, matching his intensity. It's a conspiracy theory to point out that you live like a billionaire while telling everyone else to make sacrifices. It's a conspiracy theory to question your credibility. I have made sacrifices, DiCaprio roared, his voice echoing off the studio walls, reverberating through the space. I've changed my entire lifestyle. I drive electric vehicles. I've made my homes carbon neutral. I eat a plant-based diet. I've transformed every aspect of my life. Joy burst into mocking laughter, theatrical and cruel. Oh, you eat plants? Well, that certainly makes up for the yacht and the private island. I'm sure the polar bears are very impressed. I sold the yacht 3 years ago, DiCaprio screamed, his voice cracking with fury and frustration. But you don't care about facts, do you, Joy? You just want to destroy anyone who threatens your narrow-minded worldview. You don't want truth. You want ammunition? My narrow-minded worldview? Joy shot back, her own voice now at maximum volume. I'm not the one trying to fundamentally transform civilization based on computer models that have been wrong more often than they've been right. Those computer models have been proven correct over and over again. DiCaprio's hands were shaking violently now, his entire body trembling with rage. Every prediction, every warning, every projection has come true or been exceeded. The models were conservative. If anything, really? Joy's voice dripped with sarcasm, so thick you could cut it. Then why are you still here making the same doom and gloom predictions you made 20 years ago? If the models were right, we should all be underwater by now. Because people like you keep blocking the solutions. DiCaprio exploded, his voice breaking completely. Every time we try to implement renewable energy, carbon pricing, or conservation measures, you and your allies spread lies and misinformation to stop progress. You're the obstacle. You're the problem. Joy pointed her finger accusingly at him, her face flushed with her own anger. Now we stop you from destroying jobs, crushing the middle class, and handing control of our economy over to environmental fanatics who care more about spotted owls than human beings. Environmental fanatics. DiCaprio's voice broke completely, cracking like ice under too much pressure. We're the fanatics. You're the ones who want to keep burning fossil fuels until the planet becomes uninhabitable. You're the ones who deny basic science. The planet isn't becoming uninhabitable. Joy screamed back, her composure finally cracking. That's exactly the kind of hysterical nonsense I'm talking about. The same predictions of doom that have been wrong for 50 years. Look at the data, DiCaprio bellowed, his face now purple with rage, his eyes bulging. Look at the temperature records. Look at the ice sheet measurements. Look at the sea level data. Look at the extreme weather patterns. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. I've looked at the data. Joy yelled back, standing her ground. I've also looked at the failed predictions, the manipulated statistics, and the financial incentives driving this whole movement. I've looked at the grants, the funding, the money trail. DiCaprio stared at her in stunned silence for several seconds that felt like hours. His chest was heaving, his breath coming in short gasps. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with disgust, with genuine hatred. You are exactly what's wrong with this country. You're willfully ignorant, proudly uninformed, and completely unwilling to consider evidence that challenges your preconceptions. You represent everything that's destroying rational discourse. And you are exactly what's wrong with celebrity culture. Joy fired back immediately without pause. You're arrogant, out of touch, and convinced that your fame makes your opinions more valuable than everyone else's. You think you're saving the world when you're really just virtue signaling my opinions. DiCaprio laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of humor. These aren't my opinions. This is the scientific consensus of every major research institution on Earth. NASA, NOAA, every major university, every National Academy of Science. Scientific consensus bought and paid for by environmental lobbying groups and grant money. Joy shouted, her face red now, too. Scientists who know they'll lose their funding if they don't reach the right conclusions. That's insane. DiCaprio threw his hands up in exasperation, his movements wild and uncontrolled. You're accusing thousands of scientists from dozens of countries of participating in a massive conspiracy. Do you hear yourself? Do you understand how delusional that sounds? I'm accusing them of having financial incentives to reach certain conclusions. Joy replied coldly, her voice suddenly calm again, which made it even more chilling, which is exactly what they do have. And what about the fossil fuel companies? DiCaprio demanded, his voice now from all the shouting. What about their financial incentives? What about the billions they spent spreading climate denial? What about their conspiracy? At least they're honest about wanting to make money. Joy shot back without hesitation. They don't pretend to be saving the world while they do it. They don't wrap their profit motive in moral superiority. DiCaprio stared at her in absolute shock, his mouth hanging open. Did you just say that fossil fuel companies are more honest than climate scientists? Did those words actually just come out of your mouth? I said they're more honest about their motivations, Joy clarified. But her words only fueled DiCaprio's rage further. This is beyond belief, DiCaprio muttered, shaking his head slowly, looking around the studio as if seeking witnesses to this madness. This is absolutely beyond belief. You're sitting here defending oil companies while attacking scientists who are trying to protect human civilization. You're defending the people who knew about climate change for decades and covered it up. I'm sitting here defending common sense while attacking hypocritical celebrities who want to control how everyone else lives. Joy retorted, her voice hard and uncompromising. Control how everyone lives? DiCaprio's voice rose to a shriek that didn't sound human. We want people to have clean air to breathe and safe water to drink. We want coastal cities to stay above sea level. We want future generations to inherit a habitable planet. That's not control. That's survival. You want to control energy production, transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and construction. Joy listed off, ticking each item on her fingers. That's not environmentalism. That's authoritarianism with a green label. That's totalitarianism dressed up as conservation. DiCaprio was now visibly trembling with fury, his entire body shaking. "You're completely delusional. Completely and utterly delusional. There is no reasoning with someone who thinks basic environmental protection is authoritarianism. You've lost touch with reality. And there's no reasoning with someone who thinks they can control the planet's climate by destroying our economy." Joy replied with icy calm. Her composure returned, which only made the contrast more stark. The studio had fallen into complete chaos. The other hosts were trying to gesture frantically to producers off camera, making cutting motions across their throats, their faces masks of panic. Security guards had moved even closer, just feet from the set now, ready to step in at any moment. The audience sat in stunned silence, some with hands over their mouths, others with tears in their eyes, all of them witnessing what would undoubtedly become one of the most infamous moments in television history. Camera operators were receiving frantic instructions through their headsets, but they kept filming. This was too big to cut away from. Producers in the control room were simultaneously horrified and thrilled, watching their ratings soar in real time as word spread on social media that The View was having an unprecedented meltdown. DiCaprio took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain some semblance of composure for his final words. His hands were still shaking, but he forced them to his sides. His voice, when it came, was steady, but filled with controlled anger that was somehow more powerful than all the screaming that had preceded it. "Joy, I came here today hoping to have an intelligent conversation about the most important issue facing humanity. An issue that transcends politics, that transcends ideology, that affects every single person on this planet, regardless of their beliefs or their wealth. Instead, I've encountered willful ignorance, deliberate misinformation, and personal hostility that defies belief. You've shown your viewers exactly who you are today, and it isn't pretty. And I've encountered exactly what I expected." Joy replied smugly, her satisfied smile returning in full force. An arrogant celebrity who can't defend his positions when challenged and resorts to name-calling and tantrums when his authority is questioned. You've shown your true colors, and they're not very heroic. DiCaprio looked directly into the main camera, his blue eyes blazing with intensity, speaking not to Joy but to the millions watching at home. His voice was now steady, commanding, filled with controlled anger that made every word land like a hammer. To anyone watching this, please don't let people like Joy Behar convince you that caring about the environment makes you an extremist. Please don't let ignorance and hostility win this fight. The science is clear. The evidence is overwhelming, and our children's future depends on the choices we make today, not tomorrow, not next year, today. He paused, letting the words sink in, then turned back to Joy one final time. His expression was one of pity mixed with disgust. "As for you, Joy, I genuinely hope that someday you'll realize the damage you're doing with this kind of rhetoric. When your children and grandchildren ask you what you did during the climate crisis, I hope you have a better answer than attacking the people who tried to solve it. I hope you can look them in the eye and justify what you've done today." Joy's final words cut to the studio like a knife, sharp and unforgiving. "When my children ask me what I did during the climate hysteria, I'll tell them I stood up to celebrity bullies who try to scare people into giving up their freedom and prosperity. I'll tell them I fought against elitist propaganda, and I'll do it with pride." Leonardo DiCaprio walked off the set without another word, without looking back, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He didn't acknowledge the other hosts. He didn't wave to the audience. He simply left, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces. Stunned silence and what would become the most talked-about television moment of the year. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud that the microphones picked up clearly. Inside the studio, Joy Behar sat back down in her chair, her smile never wavering, while the other host sat frozen, unsure what to do or say. The audience remained silent, processing what they had just witnessed. What started as a routine daytime talk show interview had become a cultural flashpoint. The footage would be dissected frame by frame, analyzed by media experts, turned into countless memes and reaction videos. Climate activists would rally around DiCaprio's passion. Conservative commentators would praise Joy's willingness to challenge celebrity hypocrisy. The battle lines that had always existed in the climate debate had been made visible, dramatic, and undeniable. Some would say Joy went too far, that her personal attacks cross a line from journalism to ambush. Others would argue she asked the tough questions that needed asking, that she exposed the contradictions in DiCaprio's lifestyle. Some would praise DiCaprio's passion and conviction, admiring his willingness to fight for what he believes in. Others would criticize his loss of control, arguing that losing your temper on national television undermines your message. But everyone would agree on one thing. They had never seen anything like this before. And in an era of carefully scripted celebrity appearances and pre-approved interview questions, this raw, unfiltered explosion of genuine conflict was something extraordinary, something historic, something unforgettable. Was Joy Behar justified in her confrontational approach? Did Leonardo DiCaprio have a right to lose his composure when faced with such relentless personal attacks? Is celebrity environmental advocacy inherently hypocritical, or is it a valuable use of fame and platform? The questions raised by this confrontation would continue long after DiCaprio left that studio, long after the cameras stopped rolling, long after the audience filed out into the New York streets. The View had given the world something rare, a moment of absolute unfiltered truth. Two people with fundamentally different worldviews, stripped of all politeness and pretense, fighting with every weapon at their disposal. No winners, no losers, just a raw, messy reality of civilization grappling with existential questions it isn't ready to answer. And somewhere in a hotel room or a car speeding away from the studio, Leonardo DiCaprio was probably wondering the same thing everyone else was wondering. How did a simple documentary interview turn into the fight of his life?